The plasma bolt missed Marcus's head by 3 centimeters, close enough that he could smell the ozone burning through his hair. He rolled behind the twisted wreckage of what had been a luxury transport, his shoulder slamming against metal still hot from the crash. Blood trickled down his temple, mixing sweat and combat stimulants into a cocktail that tasted like copper pennies and bad decisions. "You know," he called out to the figure stalking him through the debris field. "Most people start with hello before trying to vaporize my brain." The response came in accented standard, musical despite the obvious irritation. "Most people don't carry marks they cannot explain. Human." Marcus risked a glance around the transport's twisted hull. Commander Thalira stood 30 meters away, her alien grace making the smoking battlefield look like a stage designed for her performance. The blue tint of her skin caught the emergency lighting in ways that reminded him uncomfortably of deep ocean predators, while her pointed ears tracked his position with predatory precision. Her weapon, some kind of energy rifle that hummed with barely contained violence, remained trained on his hiding spot. "Look, if this is about that bar fight on Kepler Station—" Silence. She moved closer, her boots crunching on crystallized sand that had been fused into glass by weapons fire. "Show me your shoulder, the left one." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. 3 years of war, dozens of battles, countless interrogations, and nobody had ever asked about his shoulder. He pressed his back against the cooling metal, feeling the familiar weight of the tattoo that wrapped around his deltoid like a living thing. "How do you know about—" "Show me. Now." There was something in her voice that went beyond military authority. Desperation, maybe, or recognition of something she'd hoped never to see again. The emergency klaxons of the crashed transport chose that moment to die, leaving only the whisper of recycled air through broken ventilation systems and the distant rumble of ongoing combat. Somewhere in the maze of twisted corridors behind him, Marcus could hear the wet sounds of Veltari medics working on their wounded. The lucky ones screamed. The unlucky ones had gone quiet. "Commander Thalira," he said carefully, testing the pronunciation of her name like a key in an unfamiliar lock. "We're both soldiers. We both know how this ends if we keep playing hunter and prey in a disabled ship." "Then perhaps you should stop running." Marcus laughed, surprising himself with the genuine humor in it. "Lady, I've been running from things that wanted to kill me since I was old enough to hold a rifle. It's kept me alive this long." "Has it?" She stepped into full view now, her weapon still raised but no longer aimed directly at his position. Or has it simply delayed an inevitable confrontation? There was something hypnotic about the way she moved, as if gravity affected her differently than it did normal humans. Her combat armor bore fresh scorch marks and impact craters, but she wore the damage like jewelry, proof of survival rather than signs of weakness. Marcus made his decision with the same instinct that had kept him breathing through 6 major engagements. He stepped out from behind cover, hands visible but ready to move if she decided to resume hostilities. "You want to see it?" he asked. "The tattoo?" "I want to understand why you carry a symbol that should not exist on human skin. That makes 2 of us." He began working the clasps of his combat jacket, fingers steady despite the adrenaline still flooding his system. "Got it done on Luna Station about 10 years ago. Artists said it was ancient Earth symbology, something about protection and legacy." Thalira's weapon wavered slightly. "What was the artist's name?" "Hell if I remember. Some old guy with more stories than sense." The jacket came free, revealing the geometric pattern that wound around his shoulder in flowing lines that seemed to shift in the emergency lighting. "Why? You recognize the work?" The energy rifle slipped from her grasp, clattering against the deck with a sound like breaking glass. Her breathing had changed, shallow, rapid, as if she'd just run a marathon at full combat load. "Impossible," she whispered. Marcus looked down at his tattoo, seeing it with new eyes as her reaction registered. The design had always seemed familiar somehow, like a half-remembered dream or a song heard in childhood. Now, watching this alien warrior stare at it with something approaching terror, he wondered what exactly he'd been carrying around for the past decade. "Commander," he said gently, "what is it? What does this mean to your people?" When she looked up at him, her eyes held the weight of stars going dark. "It means, Marcus Chen, that everything we thought we knew about this war just became irrelevant." The medical bay of the disabled transport smelled like ozone and something Marcus couldn't identify, something organic and faintly sweet that made his stomach clench with unease. Thalira had insisted they move here after her cryptic pronouncement, though she'd offered no explanation beyond muttering phrases in her native tongue that sounded like prayers or curses. She worked at a portable scanner with movements that spoke of desperate familiarity, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that flickered with alien mathematics. The device itself looked like it had been grown rather than built, its biometallic surface pulsing with veins of bioluminescent fluid that reminded Marcus uncomfortably of a circulatory system. "You know," he said, settling onto an examination table that adjusted automatically to accommodate his human physiology. "Most doctors ask permission before running mysterious alien scans on their patients." "I am not a doctor," Thalira replied without looking up from her readings. "And you are not exactly my patient. Prisoner. Complication." The scanner emitted a sound like whale song mixed with static as it focused on his exposed shoulder. Marcus felt a tingling sensation where the tattoo wrapped around his deltoid, as if each line of the design was waking up after a long sleep. The feeling wasn't unpleasant, exactly, but it carried implications he wasn't sure he wanted to explore. "The bioresonance patterns are consistent with Veltari mystical traditions," Thalira said, her voice taking on the clinical detachment of someone desperately trying to remain objective. "But the quantum signature suggests origins that predate our recorded history by several millennia." "In plain standard, please. Some of us didn't go to Alien Mysticism University." She finally looked at him, and Marcus caught a glimpse of something vulnerable beneath her warrior's composure. "Your tattoo isn't human art, Marcus Chen. It's a binding mark, a symbol used by our ancestors to identify warriors chosen for a specific purpose." "What kind of purpose?" Before she could answer, the transport shuddered as something massive impacted the hull. Emergency lighting flickered, and the gravity generators produced a queasy moment of weightlessness before stabilizing. Through the medical bay's reinforced viewport, Marcus could see the pale surface of Tethys VII stretching toward a horizon dominated by industrial complexes and atmospheric processors. "We should be dead," Thalira observed with the casual tone of someone commenting on the weather. "Come again?" "This transport was shot down during a combat operation. The crash should have killed everyone aboard." She gestured toward the viewport, where rescue vehicles could be seen converging on their position. "Instead, we survived with minimal casualties, ended up in the same section of the wreckage, and discovered that you carry a mark that shouldn't exist." Marcus felt the pieces of an unwelcome puzzle beginning to arrange themselves in his mind. "You're suggesting this wasn't random?" "I'm suggesting that the universe has a sense of humor that borders on the sadistic." The scanner chose that moment to emit a harmonic chord that made both of them wince. The display filled with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Geometric patterns that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human eyes were equipped to process. "By the 7 suns," Thalira breathed. "The binding is active." "What does that mean?" "It means we're connected now, whether we like it or not." She began shutting down the scanner with movements that suggested barely controlled panic. "Soul-bonded across species lines, bound by cosmic forces that our respective governments would probably classify as weapons of mass destruction." Marcus laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the medical bay's acoustics. "Well, that's just perfect. I finally meet someone who might actually understand what this thing is, and it turns out we're cosmically married or something." "The bond is not romantic," Thalira said quickly, color rising in her blue-tinged cheeks. "It's tactical, designed to link warriors whose combined abilities are necessary for—" She stopped mid-sentence, her pointed ears twitching as she caught sounds from the corridor outside. Bootsteps, multiple sets, moving with military precision. "Rescue party?" Marcus asked hopefully. "Arrest detail," she corrected, already moving toward the medical bay's secondary exit. "My people take a dim view of unauthorized mystical experimentation, especially when it involves enemy combatants." And here I thought we were having a moment. Save the humor for when we're not about to be executed for heresy. She paused at the doorway, looking back at him with an expression caught between exasperation and something that might have been fondness. "Though for what it's worth, your irreverence in the face of cosmic significance is almost refreshing." The bootsteps were getting closer, accompanied by the electronic whine of charging weapons. Marcus pulled his jacket back on, feeling the tattoo settle into familiar warmth against his skin. "So what now? Mystically bonded partner?" Thalira's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. "Now we run, and hope that whatever force brought us together has a plan for keeping us alive long enough to figure out why." The medical bay's lights failed just as the first energy blast turned the main entrance into molten slag. The maintenance tunnels beneath the transport ran like arteries through a mechanical heart, their walls lined with conduits that pulsed with bioluminescent coolant and data streams. Marcus followed Thalira through passages barely wide enough for human shoulders, trying not to think about what would happen if the ship's life support systems decided to shut down while they were crawling through its intestines. "You know," he whispered, his voice echoing strangely in the confined space, "when I imagined my first real conversation with a Veltari, it didn't involve playing hide-and-seek in ventilation shafts." "What did you imagine?" she asked, not slowing her fluid movement through the narrow tunnel. "Something with more dignity, maybe a formal surrender ceremony, possibly involving chairs." Thalira's laugh was barely audible over the hum of ship systems. "Humans and your obsession with furniture. Do you conduct all important business while sitting down?" "Only the civilized kind." Behind them, Marcus could hear the muffled sounds of the search team breaching the medical bay. Shouts in the Veltari language mixed with the harsh whine of scanner equipment as they discovered their quarry had vanished into the ship's maintenance network. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, housing what looked like the transport's primary data core, a crystalline structure that grew from floor to ceiling like some impossible tree made of light and information. Streams of data flowed through its translucent branches in patterns that reminded Marcus of neural activity, as if the ship's computer was dreaming in mathematics. "Fascinating," Thalira murmured, approaching the core with obvious reverence. "This is a third dynasty bioprocessor. I haven't seen one of these since my academy training." "Is that good or bad?" "It means this ship is much older than it appears. Third Dynasty technology was designed to interface directly with consciousness, rather than through mechanical intermediaries. She placed her palm against the crystal surface, and immediately the core's luminescence shifted to match the blue tint of her skin. It's trying to establish neural link. Marcus felt his tattoo begin to warm against his shoulder as the core's patterns synchronized with Thalira's biorhythm. The geometric lines in his skin seemed to pulse in harmony with the data streams flowing through the crystal tree. "That can't be normal," he observed. "Nothing about this situation qualifies as normal." Thalira's eyes had taken on a distant quality as information flowed directly into her consciousness. "The ship's logs show irregularities in our encounter. The combat that brought us down wasn't random. Someone fed our respective fleets false intelligence to ensure we'd meet in this specific location. Someone who knew about the tattoo. Someone who knew about the old treaties. The binding marks haven't been used since the Shadow War, over a century ago." Her expression grew troubled as deeper information layers revealed themselves. "Marcus, what do you know about the Devourer fleet?" The name hit him like cold water. Fairy tales. Ghost stories used to scare Academy cadets. Ships that could consume entire star systems and vanish without a trace. Not fairy tales. The core's light pulsed more urgently as Thalira accessed classified archives. The ship's astrogation computer has been tracking hyperspace anomalies for the past 6 months. Something massive is moving through the void between galaxies, following patterns that match historical Devourer incursions. Marcus felt the pieces of a much larger puzzle clicking into place with the inevitability of orbital mechanics. "You're saying someone orchestrated our meeting because they knew the Devourers were coming back. I'm saying someone believes that a human carrying ancient Veltari binding marks might be the key to stopping them." Thalira stepped back from the core, severing the neural link with visible effort. "The question is whether that someone has our best interests at heart, or whether we're being positioned as expendable assets." The chamber suddenly filled with the acrid smell of burning metal as plasma cutters began working on the sealed entrance. Their pursuers had found them. "Emergency teleport?" Marcus asked hopefully. "This isn't a holovid, Marcus. Real ships don't have convenient escape mechanisms." She moved toward what looked like a secondary maintenance hatch, her movements gaining the fluid urgency of a predator preparing to strike. "We'll have to improvise." "I hate improvisation." "Then you're going to despise what comes next." The hatch opened onto empty space. Not the vacuum of the void, but something worse. A shimmering field of energy that bent light around itself like a soap bubble made of distorted reality. Beyond it, Marcus could see the surface of Tethys 7, impossibly close and simultaneously unreachable. "Dimensional fold," Thalira explained, checking the charge on a small device that looked like it had been designed by someone with a very different understanding of physics. "Emergency escape system for ships equipped with Third Dynasty technology. It creates a localized space-time distortion that... Does it work?" "Theoretically." The plasma cutters breached the chamber entrance, flooding their hiding spot with harsh light and the voices of very determined soldiers. "I really, really hate improvisation," Marcus muttered, then grabbed Thalira's hand and jumped into the impossible space between dimensions. The last thing he heard before reality folded around them was her voice, tinged with what might have been amusement. "Trust the universe, Marcus Chen. It brought us this far." Then everything became mathematics and screaming light. Reality reassembled itself piece by piece, like a jigsaw puzzle being solved by someone with questionable eyesight and shaking hands. Marcus found himself lying on something that felt like sand, but tasted like copper when he breathed it in. His entire nervous system felt like it had been disassembled, run through a blender, and reassembled by committee. "Note to self," he croaked, rolling onto his side and immediately regretting the decision. "Dimensional travel is not covered by standard military health insurance." Thalira lay a few meters away, her blue-tinged skin having taken on an alarming grayish pallor. Her pointed ears twitched weakly as consciousness returned, and when she opened her eyes, they held the unfocused quality of someone trying to remember which dimension they belonged in. "Status report," she managed, her voice carrying the automatic authority of someone trained to maintain command, even while questioning the fundamental nature of existence. Still breathing, mostly assembled, possibly in the wrong universe. Marcus sat up carefully, taking stock of their surroundings. They appeared to be in some kind of arena, a vast circular space enclosed by towering walls that rose toward a dome of transparent material. Beyond the dome, an alien sky stretched in colors that human eyes weren't quite equipped to process properly. "The Grand Arena of Tethys VII," Thalira said, recognition dawning in her expression. "The dimensional fold deposited us in the prison complex." "Prison complex?" Marcus looked around with new appreciation for their circumstances. The arena floor was covered with sand that had been raked into precise geometric patterns, and the walls bore inscriptions in a flowing script that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at it. "Please tell me this is the gift shop." "Combat trials," she explained, pulling herself to her feet with movements that suggested everything hurt, but pride demanded she not show it. "Where prisoners can challenge their sentences through ritual combat. It's considered a sacred tradition among my people." "Of course it is, because nothing says justice like watching people try to kill each other for entertainment." Thalira shot him a look that could have powered a small fusion reactor. "Says the representative of a species that invented gladiator shows and ultimate fighting championships." Touché. The arena wasn't empty. In the stands that rose in perfect tiers around the combat floor, Marcus could see figures moving, thousands of them, creating a low buzz of conversation that echoed strangely in the domed space. Most appeared to be Veltari, their blue-tinged skin and pointed ears marking them as military personnel or civilian contractors. But scattered among them were other species Marcus didn't recognize: tall, elongated beings with too many joints, compact humanoids whose skin seemed to be made of living metal, and things that might have been plants, or might have been machines, or might have been something entirely outside those categories. "Popular event?" he asked. "The most popular. Combat trials are broadcast throughout the Empire. Victory here can elevate a prisoner to hero status, while defeat—" She gestured toward patches of sand that seemed darker than the rest. "Well, the arena remembers its champions." A figure appeared on a platform that materialized from the arena's center. An elderly Veltari, whose ceremonial robes couldn't hide the combat scars crisscrossing his visible skin. His voice, amplified by hidden speakers, carried easily across the space. "Citizens of the Empire, we have an unexpected development. 2 combatants have arrived through means not covered in the traditional protocols." The crowd's buzz intensified, and Marcus could feel thousands of alien eyes focusing on their position. His tattoo began to warm against his shoulder, as if responding to the scrutiny. "This is Arbitrator Vexahai," Thalira explained quietly. "Former arena champion, now keeper of combat law. If anyone can make sense of our situation, it's him." "Commander Thalira Mordain," Vexai continued, his words carrying formal weight, "daughter of the ancient house, you stand in the circle of judgment bearing arms in the presence of one claimed as enemy. Explain this irregularity. Thalira stepped forward, her posture shifting into something that spoke of nobility and ancient privilege. Honored arbitrator, I invoke the right of discovery. This human carries marks that predate our current conflict and suggest obligations that transcend immediate political concerns. Show me. Marcus felt the weight of expectation settle around him like a cloak made of lead. Slowly, he removed his jacket and rolled up his sleeve, exposing the tattoo to the arena's lights. The geometric patterns seemed to pulse with their own illumination, creating shadows that moved independently of the light sources. The effect on the crowd was immediate and profound. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, creating a silence so complete that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat echoing in the dome's acoustics. Vexhi's voice, when it came, carried the weight of recognition and something that might have been fear. By the 7 suns and the first compact, the seal of binding returns to us in our darkest hour. Darkest hour? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Above the dome, shadows began to move against the alien sky. Shapes that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. The Devourers, Thalira whispered. They've found us. Marcus looked up at the approaching darkness, then down at the tattoo that had somehow orchestrated this moment. Universe, he said conversationally. Your timing really sucks. The shadow ships descended through Tethys Avium's atmosphere like geometric nightmares. Their hulls so perfectly black, they seemed to cut holes in reality itself. Marcus watched them approach through the arena's transparent dome, feeling his tattoo burn with increasing intensity as each vessel took position in the orbital formation above. 67 ships, Thalira counted, her voice carrying the clinical detachment of someone tallying their own execution. Standard Devourer battle formation. They're preparing for planetary harvest. Around them, the arena's crowd had transformed from entertainment-seeking spectators into something approaching a religious congregation. Veltari nobles knelt in their premium seating, while common soldiers pressed their foreheads to the deck plating, all of them chanting in harmonics that made Marcus's teeth ache. Popular with the locals, I see, he observed. They're not worshipping the Devourers, Thalira explained, her own voice taking on the rhythm of ancient prayer. They're invoking the Compact of Stars, the treaty that ended the last Shadow War. It's considered the most sacred document in our history. Let me guess, signed by warriors carrying binding marks? Warriors from 12 different species, united against extinction itself. She gestured toward the crowd's synchronized chanting. The treaty isn't just a political document, Marcus. It's a mystical working that required blood sacrifice from each signatory race. The arena's lighting system began responding to the alien presence above, emergency illumination casting everything in harsh red that made the geometric patterns in the sand look like circuit boards etched in dried blood. Somewhere in the facility's depths, klaxons wailed with mechanical urgency. So what you're telling me, Marcus said, watching as defensive turrets emerged from hidden positions around the dome's perimeter, is that I'm cosmically obligated to help save civilization? More or less. And if I refuse? Thalira's smile carried no humor at all. Then we all die horribly while the universe judges you for cosmic cowardice. Great. No pressure. Arbitrator Vexhi's platform descended to the arena floor, the elderly warrior moving with the careful dignity of someone whose bones had been broken and reset too many times to count. Up close, Marcus could see that his ceremonial robes were actually functional armor, their decorative elements concealing weapon systems and defensive arrays. "Commander Thalira," he said formally, "the situation has progressed beyond normal trial protocols. The Arena Council invokes emergency compact status. You and your companion are hereby designated as primary instruments of galactic defense." "Is that a promotion or a death sentence?" Marcus asked. "Yes," Vexhai replied without hesitation. "The binding mark you carry connects you to weapons caches hidden throughout the galaxy. Tools left behind by the original compact signatories for exactly this circumstance. But accessing them requires—" He paused, studying Marcus with eyes that held starlight and regret. Significant personal risk. Above them, the first Devourer ship began extending feeding appendages toward the prison complex, crystalline tubes that would drain the life force from every living being within range. The crowd's chanting intensified, taking on harmonics that made the arena's structure resonate like a tuning fork. "Define significant," Marcus said. "The weapon caches are keyed to genetic markers and quantum signatures unique to the original signatories. Accessing them requires temporary soul bonding with the consciousness fragments they left behind." Vexhai's expression grew grim. "Most who attempt the process don't survive the experience of sharing headspace with beings from extinct civilizations. And those who do survive emerge with capabilities that transcend normal species limitations. Enhanced reflexes, expanded consciousness, intuitive understanding of technologies that shouldn't be possible." The old warrior gestured toward Marcus's tattoo, which now pulsed with steady blue-white radiance. "The binding mark suggests you might be compatible with the process, but there are no guarantees." Thalira stepped closer, her presence offering warmth against the growing cold radiating from the ships above. "There's something else you should know," she said quietly. "The soul bonding process is intimate. We'd be sharing more than just consciousness. Memories, emotions, core experiences that define who we are." Marcus looked at her, really looked, seeing past the alien features to the intelligence and courage that had brought them this far. The universe had thrown them together through circumstances that bordered on the impossible, binding them with forces neither of them fully understood. "So basically," he said, "we either try to become cosmic superheroes and probably die in the process, or we definitely die when those things up there finish setting up their all-you-can-eat buffet." "That's a remarkably accurate summary," Vexhai agreed. The arena shuddered as the first feeding tube made contact with the facility's outer hull. Through the dome, Marcus could see energy patterns flowing upward like reverse lightning, carrying the life force of everything the Devourers touched. He looked at his tattoo, then at Thalira, then at the crowd of beings whose survival now depended on decisions made by two people who'd been trying to kill each other less than an hour ago. "You know what?" he said, extending his hand toward her. "I've had worse first dates." Thalira clasped his forearm in the traditional warrior's grip, her fingers finding the edges of his tattoo. Where their skin touched, both marks began to glow with light that pushed back the shadows cast by the fleet above. "Partners in cosmic absurdity," she agreed. The bonding process began immediately, reality fracturing around them like glass struck by hammer blows. The soul bonding hit Marcus like falling through liquid starlight, while being electrocuted by the memories of dead gods. His consciousness fragmented across dimensions he didn't have names for, touching minds that had been extinct for millennia, but somehow still burned with the desperate urgency of their final moments. "We are the Kethmori," whispered a voice made of crystalline mathematics and frozen time. "We who built cities from collapsed stars, and wrote poetry in the quantum foam between realities. Accept our gift, binding bearer, and know the weight of worlds. Marcus felt alien knowledge flooding his neural pathways, weapons that could unmake matter at the subatomic level, defensive systems that folded space-time like origami, technologies that treated the laws of physics as guidelines rather than absolute constraints. But with the knowledge came something else: the crushing awareness of failure, of watching entire civilizations consumed while their greatest weapons proved inadequate against the devourer hunger. Beside him, Thalira was experiencing her own transformation. Her body had begun to glow with bioluminescent patterns that traced her nervous system in real time, while her eyes reflected depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made the arena's structure resonate. "I can see them," she said, her words creating visible ripples in the air around them. "All of them. Every species that signed the compact. Every warrior who stood against the darkness. They're still here, Marcus. Still fighting." "That's either inspiring or terrifying," Marcus replied, testing his voice and discovering it now carried undertones that made nearby crystalline structures sing in response. "I'm leaning toward terrifying." The consciousness fragments weren't content to simply share knowledge. They wanted to take control, to use Marcus and Thalira as vessels for their interrupted war against extinction. He could feel ancient personalities pressing against the boundaries of his identity, offering power in exchange for autonomy. "Let us guide you," urged something that had once been called the architect of moments. "We know their weaknesses, their patterns. Through you, we can finish what we started." "Thanks, but I'll keep the steering wheel," Marcus said aloud, earning concerned looks from arbitrator Vexihai and the assembled crowd. "Sorry, having a philosophical argument with some very pushy dead aliens." Thalira laughed, the sound carrying enough harmonic complexity to shatter 3 different types of crystalline matter. "Mine are trying to convince me that individual identity is an illusion that prevents true tactical efficiency. They're very insistent. Tell them we're happy to accept tactical advice, but we're keeping our personalities." "I did." They're pouting. Above them, the Devourer ships had completed their feeding array deployment. Energy streams flowed upward from the prison complex like reverse waterfalls, carrying the life force of everything they touched toward the geometric vessels that hung in Tethys the Sevena's sky, like malevolent ornaments. But Marcus could see more now, his enhanced perception revealing layers of reality that normal human senses couldn't detect. The Devourers weren't just harvesting energy. They were unweaving the fundamental forces that held matter together, reducing complex organic chemistry to its component quantum states before consumption. They're not just feeding, he realized. They're simplifying, breaking down complexity into base mathematical concepts they can process. Which explains why they always target civilizations at their technological peak, Thalira added, her own expanded awareness following similar revelations. Maximum complexity for optimal harvesting efficiency. Vexihai stepped closer, his elderly features bright with something between hope and terror. "Can you access the weapon caches, the original compact sites?" Marcus closed his eyes, following mental pathways that led through folded space toward distant stars. One by one, he could sense the hidden arsenals left behind by extinct civilizations, weapons designed specifically to counter the Devourer harvest process. 12 caches, he reported, scattered across the galaxy, each one keyed to specific quantum signatures. He opened his eyes, meeting Thalira's gaze. But there's a problem. The activation sequences require simultaneous input from binding-marked warriors at each location. How many warriors? Minimum of 24. We've got 2. The arena shuddered as the Devourer feeding process intensified, stripping energy from the facility's power systems and leaving entire sections in darkness. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red that made the assembled crowd look like an army of demons preparing for war. So we need to find 22 more people stupid enough to volunteer for cosmic duty, Marcus summarized. Or we need to convince the universe to bend its own rules, Thalira replied, studying the patterns of light flowing upward toward the alien ships. Marcus, what if we're thinking about this wrong? What if the binding marks aren't just keys to the weapon caches? What else would they be? Her smile was sharp enough to cut reality. Amplifiers. The original signatories didn't just leave weapons behind, they left pieces of themselves. Consciousness fragments that could be networked together across galactic distances. Marcus felt the dead voices in his head suddenly focus their attention. Ancient minds converging on Thalira's suggestion with the intensity of dying stars. Yes, they whispered in unison. Yes, binding bearer, make us whole again. This is either brilliant or the stupidest thing anyone's ever attempted, Marcus said. Probably both, Thalira agreed. Above them, the Devourer ships began to pulse with satisfied hunger as their harvest reached critical mass. The networking process felt like trying to become 12 different people simultaneously while maintaining some semblance of individual sanity. Marcus gripped Thalira's hand as consciousness fragments from across the galaxy began linking through their binding marks, creating a web of awareness that spanned impossible distances. Kethmori Station responding, came a voice like crystalline wind chimes. Zephyrian Outpost online. Architect nodes establishing connection. One by one, the ancient weapon caches activated as the dead civilizations reached across space through Marcus and Thalira's enhanced consciousness. Each connection brought new sensations, the memory of gaseous beings who thought in color, the mathematical poetry of machine intelligences, the quantum dreams of creatures that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. This is remarkably uncomfortable, Marcus observed, his voice somehow carrying across multiple star systems as the network stabilized. Like having a conference call inside your brain with the entire history of galactic civilization. We apologize for the intrusion, replied something that had once been the temporal architects of Rigel. But circumstances require unprecedented cooperation. Above them, the Devourer ships had noticed the energy signatures emerging from the weapon cache activations. Their feeding processes slowed, geometric hulls rotating to bring sensor arrays to bear on the growing threat. They're adapting, Thalira warned, her consciousness now split between the arena on Tethys 7 and observation points scattered across 12 different star systems. The harvest pattern is shifting to compensate for the new variables. Through the network, Marcus could see the scope of the Devourer fleet for the first time. Not just the 67 ships above their current position, but thousands of vessels spread throughout the galaxy, systematically consuming every trace of complex civilization they encountered. They are not evil, observed the collective consciousness of the empathic collective. They are simply efficient. They reduce chaos to order, complexity to simplicity. It is their nature. Their nature is about to meet some serious opposition, Marcus replied, feeling the weapon systems come online across the galactic network. The arsenals left behind by the compact signatories weren't conventional weapons. They were reality editing tools that could rewrite the fundamental constants that governed physics itself. Devices that could make gravity flow backward, time run sideways, or cause mathematical concepts to develop consciousness and file complaints about their treatment. Activation requires unanimous consent, Thalira reported, her voice echoing with the authority of 24 extinct civilizations. All fragments must agree to the strike. We have lost so much, whispered the void singers of Andromeda. Our worlds, our children, our dreams. Is vengeance worth becoming like those who destroyed us? The debate that followed played out in Marcus's consciousness at the speed of quantum thought, ancient minds arguing ethics, while devourer ships continued their systematic consumption of galactic civilization. Some fragments wanted total annihilation of the invaders, others sought understanding. Still others proposed exile to dimensions where their hunger couldn't threaten organic life. You know, Marcus said, interrupting the cosmic philosophical debate, maybe we're overthinking this. The network fell silent, waiting. The devourers reduce complexity to simplicity, right? They can't process what they can't understand. He felt the idea crystallize as he spoke, drawing on insights from both human intuition and alien wisdom. So, what if we don't fight them? What if we make ourselves too complex for them to digest? Explain, chorused the assembled consciousness fragments. Evolution. Forced, rapid, magnificent evolution. Marcus squeezed Thalira's hand, feeling her understanding bloom through their connection. We use the weapon network not to destroy them, but to accelerate our own development beyond their ability to process. Thalira's smile could have powered a small star. Turn every living being in the galaxy into something too wonderfully complicated for the devourers to comprehend. Madness, declared the quantum philosophers. Brilliant madness, corrected the chaos engineers. Acceptable risk, concluded the probability dancers. The vote was unanimous. The weapon network activated not with violence, but with transformation, sending waves of evolutionary potential cascading across the galaxy. Every living being touched by the energy experienced rapid, beneficial mutation. Humans developing empathic abilities, Beltari gaining quantum perception, entire species transcending their original biological limitations. Above Tethys 7, the devourer ships encountered their first transformed beings and recoiled in confusion. The energy patterns they'd been designed to harvest had become incomprehensibly complex, full of recursive loops and paradoxical states that defied their processing capabilities. "We do not understand," came a transmission from the lead ship, its first communication in 73 years. "Your essence has become unprecedented." "That's the idea," Marcus replied, his consciousness now enhanced beyond anything he'd imagined possible but still recognizably himself. "We've evolved past being food. You'll have to find something else to eat." "Perhaps we too could change," the alien voice suggested hesitantly. The transformation process took 6 hours and 43 minutes to propagate across the galaxy. When it was complete, civilization had been fundamentally altered, not destroyed, but elevated to states of existence that made the old categories of species and conflict largely irrelevant. Marcus found himself back in the arena on Tethys 7, still holding Thalira's hand, but now aware of connections that spanned impossible distances. The binding mark on his shoulder had evolved into something beautiful, a living mandala that showed the relationships between all conscious beings in real time. "So," he said, looking at the woman who'd been his enemy, his partner, and now something entirely new. "How does lunch sound? I hear the cafeteria serves 47 different kinds of consciousness now." Thalira laughed, the sound creating aurora patterns in the air around them. I thought you'd never ask. Above them, the former Devourer ships were experimenting with creativity, their hulls blooming with colors that had never existed before. The universe had become a significantly more interesting place. Marcus decided he could live with that.